That was a rather long introduction, but thank you all for coming. I know it's late in the evening, been coming from office or wherever. Shows your interest in learning about the cloud, so welcome. What we're going to talk about today is the private clouds and see how they're driving business transformation. I chose this topic specifically because I want to look at private clouds not just from IT transformation, but how it's transforming businesses, how customers are seeing private clouds transform their business needs and business applications as opposed to just changing IT. We will certainly discuss how it's transforming IT, but how private clouds are really making their moves beyond just the IT into the real business world. So since we're not that big a group, it will be good we can just keep it interactive. As we go on, feel free to interrupt me if you have a question about anything on the charts or otherwise too. So let's get started. These are the things I'm hoping to cover today. I'll do a very quick recap of cloud computing. I'm sure all of you are familiar with it. I just want to bring everybody on the same page, make sure we are using the same terms. We'll look at private clouds, some of the key requirements for private clouds. Then we'll look at some of the model and framework typically used for private clouds. And then the real crux of the matter in terms of ROI and business transformation. We'll look at a few case studies for IBM with some of our key customers who are using private clouds, right? So before we start, is there anybody out here who believes that private clouds are not clouds at all? I get that question asked, believe it or not. I do get that question asked. Many people do think that private clouds are not clouds. Is there anybody here who agrees or disagrees?
Okay, I'll agree so you have some of it.
All right. so you agree with this, that private clouds are not. They're not.
In some way.
Isn't that the same as any individual company's server?
Okay, all right. Any other thoughts? So that's fine. So we have at least two people who believe this, and we'll come back to this at the end of the presentation. Okay, and let's make sure that I don't forget that, and let's make sure we revisit this question again to see why private clouds are clouds or otherwise. Okay. It's an important question I do get asked very, very often. Okay, a very quick recap, right? How is cloud computing defined? NIST in the US defines it as a model for enabling convenient on-demand network access to shared pool of configurable computing resources and so on. But this is obviously a very, very technology-centric definition. It only talks about hardware, network, software, storage, applications, and so on. Right? The more commonly used definition today is business-oriented, right? It's a model for enabling cost-effective business outcomes through the use of shared application and computing services. This is a more realistic definition from what we have seen by our experience and just working with many customers. It used to be the technology-centric definition was more applicable a few years back, but it's really moved on from there. And the technology-related definition is just taken matter of fact. But where it's really today, where clouds are going today, are all about enabling cost-effective business outcomes, right? So it's again on the same note, the benefits people are deriving for cloud are really moving from just improved operations to having innovative business models. There was a time, and even today, for many early adopters, they're really looking at how it will drive down the cost of running operations, purely from a machine data server point of view. But others are looking at what kind of services can cloud enable them to do. Can they do business in a different way? Can their business models be altered and actually benefit them just by going to a cloud kind of deployment models, moving beyond IT, right? The definitions around IT in terms of driving down cost of business and so on, those parameters are fairly well understood. People understand virtualization, people understand some of the key technologies there. But where it's getting interesting is what kind of business models are evolving when companies and customers are moving to cloud. Is just many people are thinking differently in terms of their businesses by thinking about adopting cloud. Is that a fair statement? Again, this is really very similar to the previous chart. certainly, yes, you're thinking IT in terms of how you would improve speed, delivering IT, without boundaries, beyond location, geographic, and so on. But really, where it's going is reinventing businesses. How do I capture business value using clouds? Can clouds help me design new capabilities from my business offerings perspective? Can I deliver higher value products and services faster? Right? Not only about the IT part of it, but what else can I do? Assuming that the IT savings are there, assuming that my IT costs will go down if I go to the cloud deployment model. What do I do beyond that? That's where really all the adopters today are thinking, not just in terms of efficiency here, but also in transforming themselves. So we look at it as a kind of it's a two-way chart, where companies are at different stages at different points. Some are thinking only about deriving IT efficiency, but some are also thinking of real transformation in their business. Again, feel free to interrupt me if there are questions. I'll keep going on. So very clearly, clouds are designed and really need to help some of the common problems facing businesses today. Doing more with less is one of the most common phrases you'd hear around. Reducing risk is an interesting one. Again, because companies used to have their one data center, maybe have one disaster recovery data center, but it's going beyond that. It's really looking at not just in terms of security, but are my applications resilient enough? Can I switch over applications as needed? Can I load balance? And things like that. So reducing risk becomes very important across all the business processes, right? And then quality of services. Can I create new services? Can I modify my services in a very agile manner? How quickly can I bring up a new service? Whether it's from my own data center or from some other data center. But how quickly can I do that? Does the cloud model enable me or help me do that or not? Right? Agility is tied really to all of these things in terms of speed of operation, speed of ability to bring up new services, new capabilities out of the cloud. Right? So again, if you look at the previous chart, we just wrote down some of the problem areas which need to solve. Now, how is cloud actually solving these problems? Whether it's private, public, or any other kind of cloud, right? We really see that three key areas there: virtualization, standardization, and automation. Right? If you look at any cloud implementation anywhere, those are the three key characteristics which are enabling or are providing solutions to the problems we saw on the previous chart. Right? Doing more with less, high quality services, increased agility while reducing risk. All of these problems have their solution in one or more of these areas. If you can virtualize, you obviously have higher utilization of your resources, economic of scale benefits, and lower capex. Right? It's going clearly to do more with less. Standardization is helping deliver high quality of services. Once you have a predefined set of services, which so you can define patterns or you can define standard topologies which you can set up in cloud, and we'll see a little bit of that as we go on. But once you are able to define that in a standardized manner, that helps you create new services that much faster. That helps you modify existing services if you need to for certain reasons, and also just maintain your existing services in a much better manner. Also reuse and integration with other services that may be around. So, and of course, automation of all of these, automation of provisioning, automation of application integration in some cases is helping with doing all these things with great speed. Right? These are not empty claims. We have actual data which we have measured in several instances. This is one example. I believe this is from within IBM, where moving from a non-cloud environment to a cloud environment, the kind of benefits we have seen. For example, server and storage utilization went from 10 to 20%. We kind of eliminated that because we already had that new servers. Where there was no self-service, now there is, it's unlimited self-service. It's difficult to measure self-service, so unlimited. But test provisioning time went from weeks down to minutes. change management again from months down to days or hours, release management from weeks to minutes. You can see the benefits there straight away. But all of these have come about primarily because services got standardized, the infrastructure got virtualized, and the mechanisms to deliver these services got automated in the cloud. Okay. And we have seen this story repeat time and again with several customers who have gone this route from having virtually no cloud to a cloud-based environment with those specific parameters about standardization, automation, and virtualization. So clearly, clouds, they need to be fast and simple to deploy, and you end up only paying for what you use. Monthly costs are low, and then the bottommost one is the most important. You can focus on your core competency, right? Some of my friends, who are not in the IT business, want to understand cloud, and they ask me this question, right, about what's cloud and all these things. And the reason they're asking is that, yes, it's a very interesting term to know today, but from their perspective, they're really interested in solving their business problems and their domain problems, and they're not looking at solving IT-related problems or process-related problems, which are, which can be handled within the cloud. So cloud is really enabling them to get away from those infrastructure-related problems, but focus on the business problem at hand. Okay. Again, very commonly used terms. I've seen, typical cloud services are deployed or are available via 4 key mechanisms, starting from the bottommost layer at infrastructure as a service, which is related to server, storage, network. Platform as a service, which includes your middleware, database, development tools, web applications, and so on. And then software as a service, which includes any software applications which might be provided out of the cloud platform, and then an emerging area of business process as a service, right? The 3 which I mentioned earlier, the infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service are better understood, right? Have been around for some time, and there are several companies providing these services via their cloud setups. Business process as a service is something new, where companies are now actually just putting their business processes on the topmost layer of the cloud, which are very specific to their domain, right? These could be expense reporting systems. These could be other applications which are very, very specific to their industry or their domain, and those business processes are also being served as a service out of the cloud. We'll see a few examples of that. So it's all about providing capabilities as a service. So whatever capabilities you can think of that are important to a business, whether it's infrastructure capabilities or software capabilities or platform capabilities, as long as these are available to be served via a cloud, they fit into one of these segments. Any questions so far? All right. Okay. So, of course, we've had several, probably thousands of customers around the world who've been using our cloud technologies. When we talk to them, a significant percentage of them prefer private clouds over public clouds, right? And also a significant percent of them prefer private clouds over hybrid clouds. Okay. And these are based on real interviews and real surveys done with our customers. And here are some of the reasons why, right? Prefer public clouds for, just increased speed, increased control, and this notion of having it very secured within your enterprise, within your firewall, right? And of course, the ability to have the governance built into your own private clouds. So you have, all these resiliency and support and so on. As long as it's in your control, I think many people are comfortable with private clouds today. Not yet answering the question I started with, though. Okay. All right. So what are the kind of workloads people are looking at for different types of clouds, right? at least within IBM and I'm sure several other companies, when we talk about what to deploy in the cloud, it's a very workload-centric view, right? We always start looking at what application you're talking about, what kind of workload do you have, and what kind of cloud is appropriate for it, right? And very commonly, if you see in private clouds, things like data mining, analytics, security, other data warehousing kind of things, these are things which people are preferring to do within their own firewall, within their own private clouds. There are people who are trying these out in public cloud as well, but they're concerned about how secure the data may be, or what kind of access they may have, especially things which are compute intensive or network intensive. Can those be handled by over public clouds? So there are several types of workloads which are well suited for private clouds, and there are other workloads which are more suitable for public clouds. Things like web conferencing, self-service help desks, your desktop clouds, and so on. These are very well suited for public clouds, right? And companies are using that. In IBM, we use web conferencing, almost daily, and that's on a public cloud. Depending on the workload, people are deciding where to put them. So when we start thinking about moving a customer, or even in your environment, if you're thinking about moving to cloud, that's the first thing to look at. What workloads are going to be there, and which workloads would make sense in what type of cloud, right? So when we go to a customer, that's where our analysis starts with. The first questions to ask is that, right? What kind of workloads and where they fit in, and then we can go and work out the other details about the specific type of cloud. So very clearly from all these different types of clouds, here are the 5 very commonly used cloud deployment models, right? You have your private clouds, which are pure private clouds right on the left side, and then public on the right hand side. And let's just look at this in a little bit detail, right? The first one is a private cloud where you have your own data center, right? All of the cloud characteristics, all the cloud features are running within your data center, and that's your standard private cloud. Now, what a managed private cloud is, where you have your data center in your enterprise, but you hire a third party to operate it. Okay, it's a very common model used by many companies, right? They don't want to deal with the IT part of it, right? So I would like to have my data center within my enterprise, within my firewall, but I want you to manage it, right? So that's a managed private cloud. And then a hosted private cloud. What's the hosted private cloud? Now, here I don't want to deal with the IT as well. I'd like you to host my IT. I'd also like you to manage my IT, right? Now, why does this not become a public cloud? Okay, because even though it is hosted at a third party, it is logically within your firewall. Okay, the network would be constructed in such a manner, whether it's via secured pipes and so on, but it is as good as your own private network, right? So many companies actually go that route because you don't want to invest in your own data center. You'd rather have somebody else own and manage the data center. But for all practical purposes, it's a private cloud, right? So there are 3 models in which private clouds typically operate. A pure private cloud, which is your own data center. The other one, your own data center, but somebody else manages it. And then a hosted private cloud where somebody else hosts it and manages it, right? Looking on the right-hand side of things, shared cloud services, moving to the public cloud kind of scenarios. The difference between the 2 pictures on the right-hand side, the shared cloud services is something which is more oriented towards the enterprise. For example, IBM's own public cloud, right? It's designed for enterprise. It's got SLAs which are appropriate for enterprise use. It's not something which you can just go to our website and put in your credit card number and sign up like Amazon, right? Amazon, you could do that. You could just go put in your credit card number, get your computer sources, and start using it right away, right? That's a public cloud as well. It's completely in the public domain. The difference is with IBM public cloud, you go through the standard IBM customer process because we are committing to SLAs, right? So other companies do that too, right? It's not just IBM, but other companies provide public cloud services, but not to a walk-in user, right? You'd go through a standard enterprise, customer process as the usual customer process, but then the advantages you get with that are your standard SLAs and things like that, which the service provider commits to. So that's really the only distinction between those two. Okay. So let me just again ask a question here. How many of you think the Google Cloud we use every day or Yahoo Cloud we use every day, is that a private or a public cloud? Public cloud? Okay. Who thinks that's a private cloud? No one? Okay. It could be?
Yeah, it could be.
Okay, why is that?
Private too. Because likewise, we can, for example, when you say hybrid, for example, some people don't call it hybrid, they call it combo.
Oh, okay. No, I'm not just talking about terms, right? The important message I want you guys to get from this picture is, where is the data stored, right? Is the data within my firewall or is it outside my firewall? That's what is really deciding whether it's a public or a private cloud, right? If my data is outside my firewall, then by definition I'm accessing a public cloud, correct? If I buy services from Amazon or from IBM, okay, as an independent user, I go put my data on IBM's cloud, okay, you are accessing a public cloud, right? So when my data is placed outside my firewall, I'm accessing a public cloud, right? Now let's look at, say, the Yahoo or the Google example again, right? Where is the data and who owns the data? Okay, let me just get into further more detail here, okay? When you fill up the form, let's take Facebook, not just Google, any of these public sites, right? Facebook or Google email or Yahoo, you're filling up a form, right? That goes into some data structure into one of these enterprises. Who owns the data structure? Facebook, right? It's within their firewall. Can you do anything to the data structure? Can you do anything to the data structure? You can't. It's owned by Google or it's owned by Facebook, right? You can change it. You're changing your data, but you're not changing the data structure. Can you request a new service to be instantiated for you? No. So is that a public or a private? In a public cloud, I should be able to request for a new service to be instantiated. For me, I'm a customer. Okay?
You think the architecture that one is fair or not fair? Because you think that it's going to be a more flexible one.
Okay.
That's why the question here, when we look at it, because here the question is the contract one. The contract definition here, others would insist on a combo situation depending on, A and B, depending on structure that you want.
Contracts is one part of it, right? But just this notion of where your data resides, right? So the reason I'm going into this a little bit more detail is because, again, many people are not clear exactly where the boundary lies for private or public cloud, right? Now, the way let me make a statement. The way I see it is, it's actually both, right? From your perspective, you are putting your data outside your network into Google, so it's public for you. However, from Google's perspective, they own the data service, they own the processes which run there, right? You can't ask for it. You can't ask for services to be instantiated, right? You can, however, for example, in Facebook, you could ask for a new application to be attached to your ID. That's as good as provisioning a service, right? So to you, it is a public cloud. That's a correct statement, right? However, the actual physical cloud implementation internal to these companies is a private cloud, where the data structure and the processes are hosted. That is a private cloud.
Just one, because do you think that the structure title here, it needs some clarity rather than, the vagueness and ambiguity?
Yeah, so it's really not ambiguous, and the intent is to remove that ambiguity, right? So So the simplest way to think about it is, where is my data placed? Who?
When you say my data,
Yeah.
that's the question.
Yes.
Whose data? When you're talking about my,
Right.
who is me?
Right. So
Who is the user? And that is what determines whether.
absolutely right. So you're right. So the user determines what the data is. The user determines where the data goes. Right. So take the case again of let's take Facebook again. You do a status update. That's your data. You're deciding to put it on Facebook server. Right. So for you, you're accessing a public cloud. You're populating it with your data. But the internal data structure which exists to support that service, and the internal processes and the internal capabilities which exist to support that service, those are internal to Facebook or to Google or to Yahoo. Right?
When you see that, actually, it depends on whether the free service or paid service.
In either case, right? So I don't mean to create a confusion here, but I think it's exactly what you said, right? The user determines what your data set is. The user determines where it's going in, and whether it's inside your own firewall or outside the firewall. That's the only distinction.
Only if you pay for, because if you are going to get for free service, the owner will decide, not you, not in any way.
Right. But you are deciding from an application perspective. From an application perspective, you are deciding whether you're doing a status update or sending a message or whatever. Right? So you are deciding from application perspective, from a user angle. But from the service provisioning perspective, that's the service owner's decision. Right? So again, the key point to get out of this really is simply to note where your data is and where it's going to reside. Now, the reason why it becomes important is when you are thinking of deploying clouds, or you are thinking about creating cloud services within your enterprise or outside, this is the question you'd face always, right? Do you want to deploy it within your private network, or do you want to go public? So hopefully this will help you decide what is appropriate for your data sets. All right? Any other questions here? Yeah.
By your definition, then what public is at the data layer or at the
So it's at the application layer. The common services we use today are public clouds, right? But if you get down to the data structure in the process layer, then it's not, because as a user you have no control over that.
So is there a definition for public and private?
This is the only definition. This is the most common definition I used. Your data inside your network or away.
But you can also have private data on a publicly available application which runs on publicly available infrastructure.
Then it's a public cloud you're accessing, right? The moment your data gets out on a public cloud, outside your firewall, it's a public cloud.
So by your definition, it's anything beyond your own.
Absolutely. Anything beyond your network, anything beyond your firewall, or whatever is your definition of your network boundary, right? Whatever is your definition of network boundary, it may be firewall, it may be just a router at home, whatever is your definition of network boundary for you.
So it will be network layer that you are.
It can mean many different things, right? So that's why I'm using this term very carefully. Whatever is the network boundary, right?
When you say boundary, some people call it control.
You call it control. For example, I might move my own pictures at home in my file server at home and never put it on any public service outside. It's still within my private control and within my private network. But I might put it on Picasa and then it's in public now. I'm using a public cloud service. You see what I'm saying? So how I define my network boundary, whether via firewall, whether via home router, or a company network, whatever that might be. If I decide that my data is going to go outside my network boundary, the moment that happens, I'm using a public cloud service.
Are you saying that even data within my own local area network is considered cloud, private cloud?
Okay, now that's a slightly different question, right? Now, in a large company, you might have different divisions who might have their private data. So you might have several private cloud instances within a company. That's possible, right? You see what I'm saying? In a small company, where there's just one cloud instance, one private network, that may be okay. But if you're talking about a large company which is geographically distributed, multiple divisions and so on, divisions might choose to have their own private clouds. Maybe we can take that one offline. It's slightly more involved than a one-line answer.
You could use an encrypted service to put your data somewhere.
Yeah.
Is then that considered private? Or because it's outside, is it considered public?
It is public. The moment it's outside, it's public. Okay. Encryption is just a mechanism, or rather an extra protection layer you're adding on. But it's still your data outside your network boundary. So it is public. All right.
So we probably define, for example, definition like cloud within a cloud.
Sorry?
Cloud within a cloud.
What do you mean by that?
That's right. So the question is that when there is a subjectivity, because one, there's a question of certain irregularity plus and so on. So the question is, it is not that developed in terms of clear-cut definition in real terms, because as you say, depend on application, depend owners, depend vendors, depend.
No. Actually, the definition of private and public cloud is very clear. It's just a simple one-line definition. Inside my firewall or outside my firewall. Now, perspectives can differ. From my user perspective, from a service provider perspective, things can be different. Yeah, that can be different.
From their point of view.
Sure, that can be different. But the definition is very clear. As a cloud user, it's very clear whether I'm using a public cloud or I'm using a private cloud. If I'm placing my data within my firewall, it's going to be private cloud, always. If I'm going to use it outside my firewall or put my data outside my firewall, encrypted or not, it's going to be public cloud.
Trying to see whether I got it right. Rephrase what you say. Using just now what you say about Facebook.
Yeah.
From the definition of the data where I put it in, it becomes a Facebook private cloud because it belongs to Facebook. It doesn't belong to me. But if I am keeping my data within my own server, that is my own private cloud. But just now, you remember I used Facebook private cloud. But because I'm using Facebook, I'm going out of my, basically my firewall.
Yes.
I'm using a public cloud.
Correct.
I'm using a Facebook public cloud.
Correct.
But from Facebook point of view, it is Facebook private cloud.
Ab-
Because they are the one who's controlling it.
Absolutely right.
Did I just get it right? I mean, so what you're saying is your private and public cloud, it depends on how you define who is owning what.
Depends, absolutely right. Depends on whose data we are talking about.
Fine, it's fine.
Yeah.
I can understand that.
Perfect.
Dave, rather more basically than going to that, what's the difference between a cloud and a network?
Okay. So the best way to understand that is between a cloud and a network. Well, network is just a transport layer. Okay. Network is just a transport layer. It's really got nothing to do with cloud. It's got nothing to do with virtualization or any of these things, right? You could have a network, just a point-to-point network between two PCs, and that's a network, right? Cloud is more related to better utilizing your existing resources. So that's why we talked about virtualization earlier, having elasticity in your system to be able to provision more or less depending on the need. We'll see some more of those characteristics come in as to what makes a cloud. Okay, but a comparison between cloud and network is really not that valid, right? Unless what you're really asking is, what's the difference between cloud and internet? That's some question. I've heard those questions sometimes, right? Where many people just, just because you're using internet, that means you're using cloud, right? Is that what you're asking, or you're asking network and cloud?
Well, can you have a cloud without a network?
Not really, not really. Now, let me qualify that by saying you can have cloud without a publicly accessible network. Okay, I might have a LAN within my enterprise. I might have a small cloud server at my home, which is within my router, which nobody else can access. I could very well do that, right? So you can have cloud without a publicly accessible network, But a network is required because you're going to have some machines to talk to each other. You need a transport, right? Yeah. One could go into a theoretical discussion about running a cloud on one box with no network, but then nobody can access the services, so it's a moot point, right? Does that answer your question, or?
I'm just not sure that cloud computing is anything more than hype for the use of network and shared services.
Oh, it's gone a lot beyond that, right? Yeah, okay. So if that question doesn't get addressed by the end of it, let's talk again. Sorry?
That was your first question.
No, that wasn't the first question. The first question was whether private clouds are clouds at all.
Same issue.
So that's why I asked, right, whether you mean network or a publicly accessible network. Okay.
All right.
So let's move on, and we'll take up that question. That's a very interesting question, actually. All right, so let's very quickly run through what are some of key requirements for a private cloud. Okay, very common requirement, and one of the most important ones is having a self-service portal, right? We've talked about some of the agility of doing things, and a self-service portal to request services is one of the key elements to do that. So typically, the way this is done is a cloud service provider will set up a catalog of services, which we'll get to in a minute, and a user can come and request for one or more of those services to be made available to that user from the cloud. Okay, so a self-service portal is the key starting point. Yes. Good question. See, right now we are getting to our answering the previous question. Hold that thought. Okay. All right. Service catalog. Okay. I just mentioned that. So typically, cloud service providers will set up a whole range of services that are available. These might be infrastructure services. These could be platform services, or these could be software services, right? Any of the capabilities we discussed earlier, it could be business processes as a service, right? All those could be made available via service catalog, and a user could request it via the self-service portal. Automated provisioning. So once the user has made a request via the self-service portal and using the catalog,